Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Alyssa, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's debate. First off, I'd like us to begin with a land acknowledgement. Indigenous peoples have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. They were and are the original environmentalists, currently protecting 80% of Earth's biodiversity, despite making up only 5% of the global population. Today we stand on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and the Williams Treaty of 1923, which was ostensibly meant to protect the land of First Nations from encroaching colonizers, but instead only contributed to their exploitation. In many of these treaties, the Indigenous peoples received only one-time payments and inadequate reserve land, or no reserve lands at all. The treaties shortchanged the First Nations and limited their ability to prosper. Our communities and our country as a whole have a history of benefiting from unfair policies and treaties at the expense of First Nations, treaties which we have often failed to even uphold. For centuries, treaties have been broken for the sake of unsustainable resource exploitation. The presence of extraction projects near Indigenous communities also correlates with an uptake in violence against Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. This shows the clear link between environmental degradation and the marginalization of Indigenous peoples. This land acknowledgement is meant to recognize the history of this land and our current situation, but it is also a declaration of our intent to seek justice for and reconciliation with Métis, Inuit, and First Nations. Tonight, we're here because of the climate crisis. We've watched as extreme weather events have gotten more frequent and more intense, as more people are made vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, as we hurtle closer to the edge of environmental disaster. Our best bet is to limit warming to a 1.5 degree increase in the global average temperature. This would mean fewer climate disasters and fewer people harmed. Most importantly, it would mean significantly lower risk of triggering feedback loops, which could cause natural systems to release greenhouse gases even without human interference. The nations of the world committed to 1.5 degrees. Our leaders at the national level made promises, ratifying the Paris Accords, while leaders at the local and provincial level affirmed the Accords principle, that to keep us safe, it's an imperative to limit warming as much as possible. Our best bet is still to limit warming to a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. The latest IPCC report says it's still possible, but that goal becomes more unlikely every day. To be blunt, 1.5 is dying. It's on life support, and our current way of doing things is what put it there. Our incremental, tiny reforms to our way of life are like putting a Band-Aid on an internal bleeding. The good news is that this is not the end. 1.5 is still possible if we act now. And even if we go over 1.5, we'd still be able to reduce harm. Every fraction of a degree of warming that we avoid translates to fewer people displaced, fewer extreme weather events, fewer species and habitats lost forever. That's the good news. The bad news is this means we've got a lot of work ahead of us. It's not the time to throw up our hands and give up, nor is it the time to continue along with business as usual. It's time to redouble our efforts to reduce emissions, because every fraction of a degree counts. This is why we're here today. We don't want to continue along this path. We want to minimize human suffering and ecological destruction. We want Canada and Ontario to shape up its act. We're here tonight to see how our parties plan to do that. We're very happy tonight to be joined by Neil Reynolds of the Green Party, Amber Bowen for the Liberal Party, and Christine Santos for the NDP. Today, as seems the pattern for community debates this election, we're sadly not joined by a candidate from the Progressive Conservative Party. Our format will be this. I have 5 questions that I'll ask each candidate, with topics ranging from emissions reduction to a just transition to climate and COVID. For each question, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. Following the other candidate's response, you'll be allowed to either move on to your own 2-minute answer or provide a 1-minute rebuttal to the other candidate's answer, which they can also choose to respond to. You'll only be allowed 1 rebuttal per question. If you start to bump up against the time limit, our timekeeper, Peter, can you wave? We'll give you a warning. When you have 15 seconds left, he will hold up a yellow card, and when you run out of time, he'll hold up a pink one. After we get through the 5 questions we've prepared, we'll turn it over to audience questions. Do any of the candidates have anything they'd like to ask about the timing or format? No? Okay, good. So to our in-person audience, if you aren't comfortable going up to the mic, which is located, can someone point at the mic? Over there, yes, thank you. We have pieces of paper located with Shamama, who is standing and waving at you. So you can write your question on them, and then she will hand it to to me, and I can ask it anonymously for you. Please try to keep your writing neat, and also keep in mind that I'm a Gen Z and I cannot read cursive. To our audience watching online, you can submit your questions in the YouTube live stream chat, or you can send them to our email, climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. That's climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. And please include the words climate debate Ajax in the subject line to make it easy for us to find. Then, without further ado, I'll move on to the first question. So any one of you guys can choose who wants to start answering, but the first question is, what is your party's climate platform, and what greenhouse gas reductions target does your party have for 2030 and 2050? How will you ensure your platforms are implemented and targets are met?
Thank you very much. My name is Amber Bowen, and I'm the Ontario Liberal candidate here in Ajax. And I've really started this journey because I'm trying to ensure a sustainable planet for my kids to play in, to learn in, and to someday raise their families. The Ontario Liberal platform was actually stemming from the last Ontario Liberal Party, who closed coal plants here in Ontario. We are going to cut methane and carbon gas by 50% below the 2005 levels to be net zero by 2015. How am I going to ensure that I'm keeping up with these changes and making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable as the Ontario Liberal Party? Well, right now, our main focus is methane, but we will also ban new natural gas plants and phase out our reliance on them as communities. We are going to eliminate the connection fees for rooftop solar panels to help transition to a fully clean electricity supply. We are also going to be creating 5 new provincial parks and designate 30% of Ontario's land as protected, as well as planting 1 million new trees per year in the first 4 years. We also are going to help with grants and interest-free loans for homes and buildings to be retrofit, updating building codes to make sure that they're make buildings energy efficient and climate resistant, and also retrofitting public buildings like hospitals, schools, and other public buildings, especially here in our community, which also creates green jobs here in the province. We're encouraging people to get back to transit, not only here in Durham, but across the province with our Buck a Ride program, which makes public transit for the next 2 years $1 a ride. So as a commuter town like Ajax, not only will we increase our transit system through bus systems here, but we will also help people transition into the city as well. We're also going to expand the Durham-Scarborough Rapid Line. And also, one of the biggest things is a rebate of $9,005 for families here in the middle class and in Ajax to get into the electric vehicles. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Santos. The inaction of the previous Liberal government and Doug Ford's shameless and destructive anti-environment agenda have let Ontarians down and have put our future in jeopardy. The NDP has a bold and practical plan to address the climate crisis, and it's called the Green New Democratic Deal. Our plan will get to net zero emission by 2050, and by 2030 will reduce Ontario's GHG by at least 50% below 2005 levels. We will hold our government accountable by actually enshrining these targets into law, electrifying all municipal transit by 2040, giving $600 to households to install electric vehicle charging stations at home, and requiring new homes to have vehicle charging capacity. Restoring the powers of the Environment Commissioner. We'll also launch a transparent, public review of the permit to take water process, especially for bottled water, to protect public use and good watershed management. We'll work closely with municipalities, industry, and Stewardship Ontario to improve and expand the producer responsibility model of waste diversion to include more sectors and set higher recycling targets. And we'll work with municipalities to expand recycling and composting services and promote an economy of repairable goods. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, okay. My name's Neil Reynolds. I'm running for the Green Party of Ontario and Ajax here. I'd just like to start by thanking the young people who are here this evening who have set up this event, and also to the folks here at St. George's Anglican Church. My daughter went to the daycare here, and I'm remembering the space right now. It's the space where we had our Christmas concert, so I'm feeling very comfortable, and I really appreciate this space, so thank you for hosting. You know what, we have three central parts of our platform to address climate change: crush climate pollution, restore water and nature, and succeed together by building a green economy. Our party's talking about cutting carbon pollution in half by 2030 and then hitting a real net zero by 2045. One of the things that we're going to do, and I think this is a bold step, is we're going to increase the price of carbon by $25 a ton every year until it reaches $300 a ton by 2032. And I know that's not going to be popular with a lot of people because it's going to mean some increasing prices, but it's a step that needs to be taken, quite frankly, if we're going to get the situation in hand to address climate change. We're going to have more renewable energy sources. We're going to totally phase out subsidies to the fossil fuel sector. We're going to eliminate fossil fuels in terms of the electrical generation in the province. Liberals did a great thing a number of years ago by phasing out coal, and we need to take that even further by phasing out all fossil fuels. $10,000 for electric vehicles, and we'll phase out all gas, diesel passenger vehicles by 2030, just 8 years away. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the second question. The provincial government is responsible for the Ontario Building Code, Transportation Infrastructure, Electricity Generation, and the Places to Grow Act, which directs municipalities to create growth plans that will shape development in the decades to come. All of these areas provide significant opportunities to reduce emissions and pursue sustainability. How will your party take responsibility and seize those opportunities to help Ontario decarbonize and become a climate leader?
Okay, thank you for that. That 2 minutes goes really quick, so I'm going to try and move through that time. So you mentioned a number of different elements to that. Transportation infrastructure is one of the hugest areas where we face challenges with respect to climate change. So we'll increase the number of fast charging stations on all 400 series highways. We'll require all parking lot developments and resurfacing to install EV charging. We'll provide tax incentives to businesses to install charging infrastructure. And we'll require existing parking lots and garages to meet thresholds for charging stations for electric vehicles. In terms of electricity generation, I just kind of spoke a little bit about the fact that we need to move away from all fossil fuels, including natural gas. We need to negotiate with Quebec to get some of that clean hydropower that they have. Just with respect to the building code, one of the things we need to do is make sure that all new homes are prepared with EV charging stations. And we need to provide municipalities with support so that they can move towards green infrastructure in local communities. And finally, we need to restore 50% of provincial cost share for transit operations and support electrification plans for municipal transit systems. Of course, we need to reduce the price of transit, but I think that needs to be shared across the province with local municipalities. Thank you.
As you highlighted in your question, there are so many ways that the government can can help Ontario become a climate leader. And I think our Green New Democratic Deal is a roadmap for how our government can actually become that climate leader. And I'll touch a few points on our plan. Our new cap and trade system will make big corporate polluters pay for their emissions, ensuring that hardworking Ontarians are not unfairly penalized. We have an ambitious buildings retrofit program with a goal of retrofitting at least 5% of Ontario buildings every year. The NDP knows that conservation is cheaper than costly new infrastructure. So conservation first will guide our energy planning to avoid unneeded costs and keep bills low. We will also work with municipalities to expand recycling and composting services across Ontario, implement a climate stress test on all provincial infrastructure to make sure communities are prepared for the effects of climate change. We'll end exclusionary zoning and increase the supply of affordable housing communities while holding the line of costly sprawl, encourage responsible development within existing urban boundaries while protecting farmland and natural heritage, and will also cancel the costly and unnecessary Highway 413 and Bradford Bypass highways, both of which would waste billions of dollars and pave over irreplaceable farmland, wetlands, and our river system in the Greenbelt. Thank you.
Thank you to both panelists. It's hard to go last, isn't it, Neil? One of the things that the Ontario Liberal Party will make sure that we're continuing to do is bring about electrification of GO trains, public transit, and school buses in this province. We are going to create a zero emission mandate for all mid-size and heavy vehicles. We're also going to be providing grants and interest-free loans for homes to be retrofit with up to 100,000 grants with easy to access entry points for families and small businesses to enact those grants. But aside from retrofitting schools and public buildings, using our transit system the way it was always intended, by using Buck a Ride, we're making it appealing and easy to use for people not only in Ajax, but across the province. And we're going to extend that transit, which creates jobs, to continue with that accessibility and to improve our just transition across the province. By 2035, we're going to make sure that all new passenger vehicles will be net zero.
Thank you for your answers. I'm just like to remind that you are allowed to respond to other candidates' statements with a time frame of 1 minute. So the third question is that initially championed by trade unions, a just transition involves a shift from high carbon activities to a green economy while avoiding harm to workers, communities, and the most vulnerable. It means making sure that nobody is left behind. What is your vision for a just transition?
So I am a unionized worker as a teacher for the past 18 years. I am also an elected executive with the Teachers Union, the Elementary Teachers of Toronto. So unionized workers matter to me in this province. We know we can't leave workers behind. The transition to a green economy must be fair and just to all. Workers, many are working in unsafe conditions in many of these places at this point. They must be taken care of and considered. And while we must create new green jobs, we must also provide the skills training for those new workers. A strength of Durham region is good paying auto jobs. We've had it for years and now it's been brought back, but it's really important that we continue to attract those kinds of jobs here. The current government has wasted 4 years to help workers with issues like canceling the rebate for e-vehicles, canceling the charging ports. We will continue to attract green vehicle manufacturing such as batteries here in Ontario. And also with the retrofitting of homes, we're going to create 25,000 new green jobs to get workers ready and to get workers into apprenticeships from already working into new green apprenticeships. And coming back to my teacher roots, we also need to bring back the trades into the high schools and into the grade 7 and 8 elementary schools so that we are giving our children the opportunity to engage in those learning modules from a young age and helping them to learn the strengths that they will need for the future jobs, which are infrastructure, but in a green economy.
I think the most important piece behind the Just Transition's mission statement is their belief in approaching production and consumption cycles holistically. We want to move to a net zero province, but we need to make sure we are all working together and no one is left behind. So our Green New Democratic Deal will create 1 million jobs, clean and sustainable jobs. We'll work with labor and industry to ensure anyone who wants to learn a skill gets the education they need. focusing on recruiting and training people from marginalized communities and those typically excluded from skilled trades, including women, racialized communities, and indigenous people. We'll also create a youth climate corps, which will give young people the opportunity to get hands-on skills and experience in restoring and enhancing Ontario's natural landscape while earning a fair wage and a credit or a fee credit towards post-secondary education. We will invest in forest fire prevention, and our new forest management programs will include expanding Indigenous managed lands. We have also recently announced a home retrofit program that will provide grants averaging $7,000 to $11,000, plus an easy zero interest on bill financing. And this will help up to 175,000 families per year to electrify their homes and make their homes more energy efficient.
Hi, thank you for the question. I think that being able to make environmentally friendly choices is something that should not be out of reach for average Ontarians, that everybody should be able to afford to make positive choices, whether it's driving an electrified vehicle or retrofitting their home. Part of the just transition as well, I think, involves ensuring that all communities move forward and succeed together. And one of the things that the Green Party proposes is that 25% of all benefits and investment go into communities that are struggling economically, so that the jobs created in the green economy impact everyone and that everyone benefits from a cleaner economy. One of the things that we're proposing is 60,000 apprenticeships in green technologies for young people, so we can get our young people into good, really well-paying jobs. We're proposing a 1% climate surcharge levy on the top 10% of income earners in Ontario, and that would create a fund of $6 billion for low-income households, so that they'd be able to participate in some of the choices that'll help move us forward, whether that means getting electrified vehicle or doing some home retrofit programs. That would be advantageous. Then finally, one of the things that the party would do is conduct a transition census and look at vulnerable jobs and vulnerable sectors and look at who are the people who are going to be most impacted as we make the transition away from fossil fuels, so that we can support communities. And there will be some communities that will be disadvantaged as we make this shift. Amber alluded before to the fact that the Liberals transitioned away from coal. That was a big deal for a lot of people. Some communities were impacted adversely, and that's going to happen as we move forward to a cleaner future. And we need to provide support for those folks who are in those old industries. Thank you.
All right, moving on to question 4. COVID-19 clearly demonstrated that business as usual is not the only option for work-life balance. We've learned that we don't always have to drive to work, that people generally would prefer to be able to work partly from home, and that this makes a lot of our office space redundant. How will you and your party take advantage of the opportunity provided by COVID to make changes that benefit people and the planet?
Thank you. So I think that one of the most significant changes that's happened in the last little while is that more and more people have worked from home. And whether that means working from home on a full-time basis or a part-time basis, it's something that we need to actually encourage and work towards and work with industry and employers about. We've taken thousands of cars off the road, thousands of cars off the 401, the Don Valley Parkway. We've seen the difference that it makes having people work at home. And we also know that there are certain health benefits to not spending hours and hours and hours in our cars, being more available for our families. I don't think as teachers that Amber and I will ever benefit from work from home programs. I think the kids are always going to need us there at school. But I think that's one of the most significant things that we need to work with employers on is coming to some arrangements that allow people, if you're not a client-facing type person and your participation is absolutely not essential in the office, then why go back to the office on a full-time basis? So I think that's one of the things we've learned. One of the things we really need to do is freeze urban boundaries to prevent sprawl. This highway that the Conservatives are proposing is just going to create more demand for homes a lot further away from the city center, putting people back in their cars and back on the roads. It's a 1950s style proposal that's not gonna benefit anyone. And at the same time, we're gonna pave over thousands of acres of prime farmland right outside Ajax. It's really not a help to anyone. So, you know, the Green Party proposes 15-minute neighborhoods, and basically what they're saying is all planning should be based around the idea of 15 minutes to work, 15 minutes to shopping, 15 minutes to recreation and green spaces so that people don't have to spend so much time commuting all over the place. Perfect, thank you.
The COVID-19 has caused immense losses for Ontarians. More than 12,000 people lost their lives. Nearly 4,000 seniors died in isolation and in pain at long-term care homes. Small and medium-sized businesses have struggled to keep the lights on. Children and young adults struggled with on and off going to school. There's a lot of setbacks that had put in place. Healthcare workers are burnt out. People are waiting in pain for their surgery to be available at the next available appointment. COVID-19 has highlighted that the status quo is not working. And it's a dangerous to continue down that path that has been created by consecutive conservative and liberal governments. So now is a time to end for-profit long-term care homes because our seniors deserve dignity and respect. A $10 childcare, $10 a day childcare, whether you're working from home or going to the office, will make life easier for many parents. We also have to review our water taking permits because it's wrong that a few companies are taking millions of gallons of water a day while communities are still on boil advisories. Now is also the time that mental health care is tied to your OHIP card and not your credit card. That's one of the things on our platform. And introduce a new Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act and other pandemic legislation to strengthen our ability to respond to crisis. And now is the time for a bold plan that would move Ontario to a green, sustainable economy that benefits the hardworking people of Ontario, and I think that NDP has that plan.
Thank you very much. It does seem funny to talk about opportunity and COVID in the same sentence. So I don't really think that there was opportunities created by COVID because there has been so much death and heartache for families and businesses alike. However, two things that have come across are respect for workers. So, you know, allowing 10 paid sick days for all workers in Ontario so that when they are sick, they can stay home and prevent the spread of diseases such as COVID-19. And helping small to medium businesses to subsidize those 10 paid sick days, because we know that usually it's women and families who are the most impacted by those lack of days. And also using the hub and spoke model for senior and community care in this province, making sure that emergency room visits are for emergencies and providing care back into homes and within the community. And repealing Bill 124 so that we can show the respect for our healthcare heroes after 2.5 years of a pandemic, putting them back into a position where they feel ready to come to work and bringing in 100,000 new nurses. However, at the end of this election is fundamentally important for the future of not only our global, but our local environment. On one side, we have a candidate who showed that she was against the Carruthers Creek headwaters being put into the Greenbelt until she had to be in support. Whereas I've been fighting for the environment alongside many of you in this room with some of our local environmental groups. I've stood in protest of ministers' zoning orders in the Ajax wetlands, Ajax and Pickering wetlands, and I stood outside our previous MPP's office in the dead of winter to speak out and in defense of the Carruthers Creek headwaters being added to the Greenbelt. So there's a fundamental and critical decision that we will need to make as members in this room, as members in this community, about how we are going to go ahead and defeat a government that is so intent on tearing apart our local environment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to move into the last of our moderator-prepared questions. I'm going to offer the chance to Christine Santos to answer first for this time, just because she hasn't had the opportunity yet. So our actions today will define not only the physical climate, but also social inequities. In Miami and Jakarta, the wealthy can afford to move out of the danger zone, while the poor are priced out of safe neighborhoods and forced to live in areas vulnerable to flooding and sea level rise. This is an example of how our reactions or inaction can further entrench existing inequalities. Alternatively, we can shift direction and set a new agenda, choosing to act in a way that helps to improve people's lives. This is the difference between a reaction and a vision. So my question to you is, how will you be a visionary?
Hello, okay. Our entire platform centers on our core value of putting people at the heart of our every decision. We're putting people first. And I think we're already paying the price of climate change whenever we are cleaning up after flooding or tornadoes that have happened. With the Ontario NDP and with Andrea Horvath, we bring hope. Together we can fix what has been broken. We can make progress to fight climate change. And I will just go over again the things that we have in plan to make sure that we have an achievable and effective climate plan change. So we're requiring that all newly built public, residential, and commercial buildings be net zero by 2030. And the launch of the world-leading building retrofit program, Ontario's first zero-emissions vehicle strategy, ramping up electric vehicle sales to hit 100% target by 2035, and giving families cash to install a charging station at home. New cap-and-trade program, which I mentioned earlier, electrifying all municipal transit by 2040, restoring the powers of the Environment Commissioner, planting 1 billion trees by 2030. And I think that our new democratic deal, our whole platform is a commitment to put people at the heart of our decisions, whether that is protecting the environment, increasing services, or making sure all Ontarians have the opportunity to thrive.
One, two, three. Go ahead.
Is the way to go. I feel quite heartened actually to hear the programs for all of our parties here, and I wish that the Conservative could be here as well tonight. We all have children on the stage here, and my sole focus for running for the Green Party is I have a 15-year-old at home who feels depressed and despondent sometimes that the future doesn't look great, that they wonder what type of future that they will have. And we've had many conversations around the dinner table about climate change and what that looks like. The storm that we had yesterday, I think they're calling it a Derico, something I've never heard of before. It's not a tornado, but it's a major weather event. We lost thousands of trees, which was devastating. We lost roofs on homes. The 70-year-old trees, I think, was such a shame to lose, trees like that. They provide shade, they help fight climate change. So all of that is heartbreaking. I wish the Conservative candidate was here, quite honestly, because back in the 1980s, we had a problem called acid rain, and a Conservative Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney, and a Republican president in the States worked to combat the acid rain issue when our lakes were dying, and it was Conservatives that took the leadership and said, we deserve a better country than this. So I'd really like to see some action happen, and for the Conservatives really to get their heads out of the sand and address this problem and say, hey, there's great opportunity here. We could be leaders in Ontario in clean technology and provide jobs for people, and at the same time address an issue that's going to reverberate for generations to come if we don't do something right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I disagree slightly with the question because I think we do need to be slightly reactionary. We have to make immediate changes to some of the things that have happened during the past 4 years. We have to cancel Highway 413. That's a reaction. We have to talk about decarbonizing. We have to create new jobs in a green energy sector by training and retraining and certifying workers. But while we are doing those immediate reactions, we can also be looking forward to what we can create. And these things together that the Ontario Liberal Party will bring forward will help give Ajax a firm place in the new green economy. Such things as green battery production, increasing our green hydrogen technologies, making transit available and affordable, rebates for e-bikes and e-vehicles, and making sure that we are investing in economic growth across the province together.
All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to turn it over to audience questions. So feel free to step up to the mic, write your question on a piece of paper held by our lovely friend Shamama over there, or send it in online for our folks who are watching the live stream. Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for coming. My name is Susan Spicer. I live here in Ajax. And my question, I'm pleased to hear that we're going to electrify the province. However, and this may be my terrible ignorance on this, but where does the electricity come from? Is it nuclear power? Is it hydroelectric power? Do we already have enough? That's a big question for me because there must be infrastructure needs that will create some environmental challenges. Thanks.
They can direct them to a particular candidate. If not, you guys have the same amount of time to answer any of them.
Is this 2 minutes before we get the yellow card? Yeah.
Should I go first? Okay, I'm going to go first. One of the things is how do we find that electrical panel? And we know that, a few years ago, I remember that the lights went out for a good 5 days and everyone barbecued everything. One of the big things we will be doing is eliminating the connection fees for rooftop solar panels so that we can help transition to a fully clean electricity supply. So making that an incentive not only for small homes, but businesses across the province.
For us, our stand on this is to expand renewable energy using wind and solar power, yeah.
Yeah, so we have some good sources of power. Some of them are nuclear right now, and 2 of our plants have recently been upgraded, so they're going to be running for some time. And so we're going to be dependent on that fuel or that source of energy for quite some time. And the other thing is hydroelectricity, right? And Quebec is, quite a huge source of hydroelectricity, so we need to work with them. So they're not sending their power down to the States, they're sending their power next door to Ontario. And then also looking at those renewables. So Doug Ford and his government canceled, many contracts that the Liberals had in place for clean energy. And we spent $278 million to cancel those contracts so Doug Ford could focus on Buck a Beer and other significant projects. So we need to start thinking about what are those projects that we need to get back to, the wind, the solar, et cetera. And also to phase out natural gas. That was a bold move, phasing out coal back during the Liberals' time. And that's what we need to do, is we need to take those bold steps.
Thank you. My name is Gail Lawler, and I work in net zero energy housing. I just taught a course last week in Tyendinaga, Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, teaching women in trades how to build net zero energy homes. And I keep thinking we're forgetting that net zero energy means that there are solar panels on the roof. So I'm happy to hear reducing the cost because it's about $30,000 to make a net zero energy home, net zero energy so that there's a neutral or zero energy bill at the end of the year because of the solar panels on the roof. We can also work towards net zero energy ready, which means we don't put the solar panels on the roof. But I think part of our focus, and I would like to hear what the parties say about, we have to make all of our other equipment, like heat pumps, are the way that we're moving towards. And air source heat pumps can be up to 300 to 400% efficient. But I think there needs to be more emphasis on the manufacturing side and improving the efficiency of more of our equipment. And water heaters is a huge area where they're very inefficient. Mandating perhaps heat pump water heaters, but the price of those are very, very expensive and very difficult for consumers to consider. So retrofitting existing homes to net zero energy is my main interest. New builds are easy. Retrofit is difficult, but finding and producing the manufactured goods that have a higher efficiency rating is really important, and what are the parties doing towards that aspect? If we have solar panels on all the roofs, just to finish that thought, we don't need as much renewable energy being produced because each house will be producing their energy. And there's one home in my neighborhood who was without power throughout the last weekend, and she said, I had my solar panels on my roof and I didn't need any power, so she was thrilled. So battery backup is the other issue too. A whole bunch of things there. Pick whatever you like.
Well, we're just going to talk about whatever we want then, if it's going to be... Well, That was a big question. I think the key thing is, you're working in this industry is, the government can play a significant role in incentivizing people to make good choices, and that applies to industry as well, but also providing support to industry for making those positive choices, and then making companies pay the true cost for the business that they're doing right now. Every year now in Ontario, we have forest fires in the north. We see it every year. It used to be a rare occasion that we had massive fires. We lose thousands of hectares every year. And it's going to happen again. We know it's going to happen again this summer. And so what we need to say is, how are we going to make companies accountable for the true cost of climate change? Because we're already paying for it. The insurance companies are paying for it. Governments are paying for it. Private citizens are paying for it. So we have to say, how are we going to make those companies pay for the true cost of doing business? I don't know if that answered your question, but it's what I wanted to talk about. So. Thank you.
With our new cap-and-trade system, 25% of the revenue is actually going to help. So we're investing that 25% of revenue from the cap-and-trade towards rural areas and low-income families. So in a way, that's also helping. So it's not like anybody's keeping that money, but it's actually helping facilitate and helping more families to actually afford energy and keep keep the energy low. In terms of, the retrofitting is definitely a great one that we're really excited about, both on the residential and for the buildings. And investing I know that with the manufacturing, we're going to be working with experts and the manufacturing industries to see how we could invest in more equipment that would help push this agenda forward to make sure that we are keeping the costs low for everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm actually going to focus back on the manufacturing side of creating that net zero community. And that always goes back, as a teacher, I always go back to education. That's why we need the trades back into schools. And one of the things that the Ontario Liberal Party will be doing is we'll be holding 2,000 jobs that are new green jobs for graduating high school students before they go into a post-secondary education, to give them the opportunity to engage in those jobs and early onset training. And by creating that skilled workforce, we will be able to incorporate those things and prioritize the systems we need across the province.
And I'm an Ajax resident. My question may be rambling because it's a topic I don't quite understand, but we did the land acknowledgement and we identified that Indigenous communities have had, a lot of difficulties for a lot of reasons in the past. So the Conservative government has been talking, it's unfortunate that they're not here to talk about it tonight, but a lot of talk about the Ring of Fire, and we've been talking about batteries. So this is a topic I don't understand, but I feel instinctively that there may be an issue with what they're proposing to do in the far north with the Ring of Fire, and I have no idea what what they're mining or what they're doing, but I wonder if the candidates can speak to that, because it sounds like it's a technology that needs to move forward perhaps, but I'm not understanding the impact of what the Conservative government's proposing or what possibly the candidates may know about it. Thanks.
So I think that's a tricky one as well, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And also, it was interesting to hear the land acknowledgement that you developed today as well, because in our workplace, for Amber and I, we have land acknowledgement that we do every day, and it's fantastic that we're growing up in a generation where students will hear the national anthem and then also the land acknowledgement, and also try and understand that in its different forms. So I think with the Ring of Fire, there's minerals in the north, and I think cobalt is one of them in particular. And a lot of those minerals would be helpful for battery technology, right? And so the location of Ring of Fire is some distance away. So there's some transportation and logistic issues just in terms of bringing those resources to market for processing and that sort of thing. And then the other factor is that we have to acknowledge that it's other people's land. And when we look at mining and accessing resources, it has to be in partnership with Indigenous communities. We can't run roughshod over other communities in our rush for economic prosperity. And so that's one of the central tenets of the Green Party. Is to work in partnership with Indigenous communities so that we can bring prosperity, but also honor the voices of the people who are on the land, because really the significant impact will be for them. With a lot of mining projects, whatever it might be, whether it's in Sudbury or Nickel Belt or what have you, the big companies walk away from these projects, and the local people are left to deal with the impact of what's left behind. So it has to be done in partnership.
A core of what we do at the end, or what we stand for at the NDP, is definitely the protection of Indigenous lands. I'm going to just make sure I say this right, because in 2019, NDP MPP Saul Mamakwa tabled Bill 76, which is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People Act. So this ensures that any of the Ontario laws that we have are consistent with this act. And having said that, I know that this was mentioned earlier, that whatever paving of land or mining, that we always make sure that the Indigenous lands are protected. And that's all I can say in this matter.
Thank you, and thank you for always holding people accountable to Canada's efforts to truth and reconciliation, because above all profit and business, we need to be respectful, mindful, and paying attention to that. You know, I do talk a lot when I knock on doors about maybe building a battery operation here in Ajax, because we have the space, and it would bring in thousands of unionized workers into our town and our in Durham region. But mining for natural resources hurts our lands. It affects the local Indigenous communities, and it's dangerous work. So there needs to be a lot of different things at play before we start discussing how we're going to mine, where we're going to mine, and how that Ring of Fire actually plays into what we can talk about here. I think those discussions actually have to happen at a local level before they come through the province. So thank you for that question.
Hi, my name is Judith Wright. I live in Ajax. I'm also a certified arborist and landscape architect. So I'm keen about the climate change and the million trees that you're going to plant, and will they survive? When you go about looking at alternatives for whether it's going to be, like I'm big for the solar panels, but when you look at alternatives, what professionals do you rely on to help you make an informed decision? Because there's to me, so many people need to be part of that decision-making process. It's no different from you know, the health, the doctors being part of, the nurses, and having gone through the death of 2 parents and seeing what they've gone through. I'm separating it, but I'm trying to put the two together. Seeing what needs to be done in policies. My parents, every day when I would go to the hospital, there was a different nurse, and I had to go through the whole scenario with each nurse about what was done. And even when I was in hospital for a week, one nurse came in and she said, "When's your operation?" I had it 2 days ago. You know, it's so disconcerting. But what I'm saying is that whether it's large or small, who are the professionals that you're going to? I know the OLA would love to be part of the conversation of the climate change, and I deal with road schemes, I deal with hospitals, I deal with developments, subdivisions. That's all my portfolio. And I've seen how buildings can just come in and wreck. And I want people to thrive, and I'm totally feel there's such a difference with landscape and trees and being in a community and being out instead of stuck behind a computer. But what all this also entails is people having a change of heart and a change of attitude. So good luck to you in doing that. But the question was, what professionals do you go for?
I think that everyone is a stakeholder when it comes to our environment and our climate. So whether it's when we say, like, you know, the Environment Commissioner, the Conservation Authority that had been cut before during the by Ford, and then we're looking at experts in the field, like science-based. And the youth. That's why we have the Youth Climate Corps, because they have they have a voice in this matter to be able to shape how they want their future to be. So I would say it's a combination. When we say experts, yes, so to rely on science, but at the same time we have to work with our municipality. We have to work with our residents and understand exactly what do people have to say about any changes that's going to impact everyone in this case.
Thank you. So until a few months ago, I didn't know what a landscape architect is, and now I do. And I think that it's important that we respect and utilize all the experience we have in this province in regards to building communities. We know from the disasters that's, the city of Toronto shoreline, where there are more sky rises in front of our lakefront than, in most major cities across the world. And it's a disaster for our shorelines. We know that in South Scarborough, the shoreline and the cliffs and the Guild are eroding into the waterfront. How do we build responsibly? And the only way that builders can build responsibly is if they take on the experiences of the people in the community. We know that many people who move to communities like Ajax, and I know for myself and my family, it was key that we have places to be and to play and to explore together, not concrete. So understanding all the unique professionals that come together to build a lush, green, environmentally friendly community, we will absolutely take into consideration. Thank you.
So it's an interesting question that you ask. Who do we listen to? And I think that it's interesting. All of the parties here have their own policies, and they've been developed by the membership and policy specialists and that sort of thing. And I think that one of the things we have to do is we have to look outside of Ontario and Canada to other jurisdictions as well that are grappling with some of the same issues that we're dealing with. So, for example, Europe is a more compact, condensed place, as is Japan or Korea. And so we need to look at other societies as well, because there are other great models out there for how do we organize urban planning so that people are in livable communities that they want to be in. You raised the point before about boilers. So I know a lot of tradespeople from Europe, and they tell me all the time, this is such an energy inefficient place. There is technology in Great Britain and Germany that is way ahead of where we're at in terms of energy efficiency, and we're throwing money out the door, right? So I think that we need to look far and wide. And, just with respect to, the plans about planting trees, it's great to set a goal and say, we'll plant 1 million trees or 1 billion trees or whatever it might be. But if you plant pine trees in rows, you're not creating a new ecosystem. You're just creating a green desert in a different place. And from a distance, it looks green, but we're not replacing the forests that we have that have a great deal of diversity with lots of species and that sort of thing. So I think it's really important to get a lot of opinion, but also to look outside of Ontario and say, hey, there's other places in the world that are doing things really well, so let's learn from them.
Thank you.
Hey, hi there. So I'm going to try to keep this short because you're not here to listen to me talk. But tomorrow morning, I'm not sure if you are aware of Envision Durham, which is basically the Durham Regional Council's, basically their plan on how much expansion we'll have, how much urban boundary expansion, and kind of like the division of low, medium, and high density housing. So what's happening tomorrow is Regional Council will be voting on like what, how much expansion we'll have and what kind of division we have. So what they've done is they've created 5 scenarios. Scenario 5, which is the least expansion, no urban boundary expansion, and scenario 1, which is a lot of expansion. And what's actually happened is the development industry, the development lobby, has kind of presented their own land use scenario. And for some reason, the Planning and Economic Development Committee chose to recommend that scenario. So that's going to council tomorrow. So my question is, can we count on you, whether as candidates or as elected officials, to support us in trying to reduce urban boundary expansion, whether that be kind of reacting to a negative result tomorrow or supporting the implementation of similar positive results in other jurisdictions? Oh, I'm gonna.
Can we just answer with yes, we will support it? I think it's really important to, to understand that in a community like Ajax, we need to welcome new residents in. It helps with infrastructure, it helps with our tax base, but we also have to understand that we need to develop things responsibly and with the future in mind. So one of the things is making sure that, vital headwaters like Carruthers Creek gets added to the Greenbelt. It was a promise made by the previous MPP in Ajax 4 years ago, and yet still we're outside protesting that today. So, yes.
Yeah, definitely. We want the development to happen within the existing boundaries that are already there, the existing urban, instead of doing sprawls. So that is our stand on that, and just really protecting the farmlands, not paving over our wetlands and farmlands. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that you're looking at things as Durham-wide. Ajax is at capacity. I don't think that there's a lot of room left in Ajax for any more development of any kind. So really, I think really what we're looking at now is what's happening in Durham, and is it possible that we can freeze existing boundaries so that we're utilizing the space that we have and looking at, you mentioned a mix of density. Because the overall impact is longer commutes for people. The more we add to the region, yes, there's economic growth, which is great, but the quality of life starts to diminish when we add time to our commutes, we are more pressed for access to services. So it's something that I'm glad you're keeping an eye on, as well as the time, because that's important. Thanks.
Hello. I have a question from one of our online viewers. So Cam writes, this is a question for the Liberal candidate. When the Liberal plan for Buck-a-Ride ends, how much are they going to charge for public transit?
Thank you for that question, online viewer. You know what, I actually am not quite sure of that specifically because I'm so focused right now on making sure that for the next 2 years, we're increasing transit accessibility across this province so that we can show that we're using it enough to support how we're going to support it after the 2-year Buck-a-Ride incentive is over.
Are there any final questions?
I love Ajax. I love the waterfront. I had 2 hours bird watching this morning. I just love it. I get concerned. I'm big on community. I'm big on organic. I get concerned about productivity, boom, 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 pesticides and all that jazz. And I'm getting concerned how development is getting into the good farmland. I'm hoping, you know, when we're seeing prices go skyrocketing. My brother in England is telling me that their electricity bill could go up another £800, which is about $1,600 in October, and it's already gone up. I don't know why it's all tied into Russia and what's going on, but I mean, there are things externally that happen, and we're seeing it with our own fuels, but we're also seeing with fuels. I'm doing a design, and I went to look at a product. It comes in from Spain, which is stuck in a container, and it's going to an extra 20,000 just to get it over here. I like things more built in Canada, that we don't have to depend on other countries so much. And it was something that I brought up before about the environment, because it seems to me certain countries... You okay? I'm concerned that we're getting things from other countries which doesn't last long, and then we become a throwaway society. It really, really bothers me that we can't get ourselves to do certain works, and we're okay to put someone else in dire straits, unethics, and all that jazz. But we really do need to do something about it and put people before the bottom line. I'm sorry, but I sort of say, either I'm going to spend, put it this way, a client, he goes for the lowest price, and I say, well, you're either going to pay me lots of money to keep an eye on him because you went with the lowest price, and so he's going to try and mess it up. Or you can pay someone a proper money, and then you don't have to pay me, and he does a proper job. So there's a balancing in everything. And I think that we really do need to think about, are we paying for all the environmental waste and what's happening there? The plastics and all this jazz. I just hope to see that we do more in that, and I'm hoping each party will be doing their part in that. Thank you.
Okay, all right, I'll start. I think you touched on a couple of points that resonated with me. Definitely the locally produced products is important. Part of our platform is Buy Ontario for Ontario, and we have to put focus on our farmers and help them. One of our programs is to provide loans for new farmers. So I think that will really help, and that we can locally produce our own, and also there was something else on the second point that you said. Oh, the plastic. Sorry, that was one thing that you said at the last part. And one of our commitments is to ban single-use plastics. And I think that will really help with, with our environmental protection.
You had a number of points there, and you didn't actually leave us with a question, though. I'm just going to point that out. So I'm just going to respond to a couple of things that you said, okay? We're losing right now 175 acres a day in Ontario to development. And I don't think that's a big shocker when you drive around the region and you see new home builds in Bowmanville, Mississauga, Brooklyn. It's all around us right now. But just think of that, 175 acres a day. You can drive north of Taunton Road, and there's some beautiful green spaces, really just right on our doorstep. There's beautiful spaces within Ajax as well. The Green Party is not against development or we're against sprawl, right? And I think that we need to look at the spaces we have. We need to protect our farmers. We need to support them. The pressure on farmers right now is incredible. You're having massive developers walk up and offer millions of dollars for a family farm. It's too much. It's too much pressure to be able to say no. So government does need to support and put boundaries in place to say, this is prime farmland right on our step. We need to buy local. We need to buy from local farmers. And a good part of this as well is consumers and individuals making choices not to purchase throwaway items, right? There's clothing that's virtually throwaway. Right? There's electronics that's virtually throwaway. We need to teach our kids in the schools about making good environmental choices. Climate change and all of these other environmental issues, it's up to everybody. It's not just up to the government. It's not going to be just up to the MP to make sure it happens. Everybody has to take a role.
Thank you. I really respect this panel because I think that despite the fact that we have some slight differences in how we're going to, bring about a green economy, that's about 5%. I think together we all 100% agree that we need to stop Doug Ford here in Ontario from building a 413 across our prime farmlands, from developing things like Carruthers Creek into condo towers. So we must continue moving to that just transition that we all aspire to here in Durham Region and especially Ajax. I think that talking about sustainability and making sure that we have food sustainability here in the province through COVID was so apparent. But in terms of doing that, we need to make sure that we're investing in workers, we're investing in farmland, we're helping workers come to be part of that workforce here in the province. So I think that while we sometimes have differences of how we're going to do things, together we must come together as the people in this room and across Ajax. I really am hoping that you will support figuring out how we're going to defeat Doug Ajax. He better not be. How we are going to defeat Doug Ford in this province. And there's right now one really important way to do it. So I'm asking you to please take really good precaution of how you're going to vote this year so that we can make this an issue, that we can continue these conversations together without him being part of that mix. Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh,
Shimama, do you have it?
I was just going to ask if there was any more questions.
All right,
Anyone?
yeah. It is about time to start wrapping things up, so we're just going to have one more question, and then we'll pass it over to our candidates to give some parting remarks.
Okay, so when we were developing the questions for this debate, we ended up, basically trying to throw a lot of things at the wall and see what stuck. And there was one question that we thought was a good one to ask, even if it's not the best for one of the 5 major questions, because it's kind of a yes or no. And then we also figured it's kind of personal to me. So as an immigrant, it's kind of, a personal question for me to ask. So climate change will displace millions of people, with up to 1.2 billion at risk for being forced out of their homes by 2050. While most of those people will be internally displaced within their country, some will become refugees. This means that we're also at risk of seeing a significant rise in racism and xenophobia, something that we've already seen with the rise of far-right groups. My question is this: are you prepared to oppose any xenophobia that you see in the legislature and fight for the well-being and human rights of refugees, including climate refugees?
We had been fighting for that. Actually, Bill 86 is one of the things that we had been proposing since last year, but the current government has been delaying it, and that's our London Family Act, which is really anti-Islamophobia, anti-racism, and anti-hate. I am an immigrant. I was a first-generation immigrant. I moved here when I was 19, so I know firsthand the challenges of a young adult assimilating into a new culture. And for us, yes, we are prepared. We had been fighting for it. It should not be a partisan issue. It should be about the people, making sure that people feel safe in the communities they're in. They should feel safe whatever they're wearing, whatever head covering they may have, whatever color they may be, what religion they might be practicing. They should feel safe around worship spaces. They should also feel safe at schools, having a proper complaint process in place when teachers, workers, or students are feeling intimidated, discriminated, or harassed, and having accountability for the government to actually have rules in place that if people are actually committing those acts, that there is a repercussion in place. So to answer your point, yes, and we had been working towards that.
So that is an excellent question, and I just have to say, to have young people so engaged in this type of debate as a teacher is extremely motivating for me. So thank you very much, and inspiring, really it is. And again, I go back to education. One of the first things that Doug Ford did when he took office was he canceled the Indigenous curriculum writing that was already ready to happen here in the province of Ontario. And then Stephen Lecce, 2 years ago, canceled the anti-racist curriculum. If we don't have those things embedded in our school systems for children to access from the moment they come into public education, then how are we preparing our communities to make sure that we are providing inclusive spaces for everybody in them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that you pose. And I think you asked if yes or no at the end. And I can tell you that I stand against all forms of racism and discrimination. And, it's a really interesting point that you raise, because we are going to see in the next while people shifting around the world, avoiding areas that are really significantly impacted by climate change and seeking new homes, right? And it just goes to show what a global issue this is right now, is that we have to take really urgent action. The racism and discrimination, I agree with you. I think that will become an issue as people see people moving around. And it's something that we need to look at, on a global basis. You mentioned 1.5 degrees before. We are heading so quickly to a massive disaster right now. And we need to take really, really urgent action to address that. So thank you for that question.
All right, now it's time for our parting remarks. For anything else you'd like to say, any closing thoughts or takeaways, and we won't have any direct responses or rebuttals from each other for this one. Not that that really applied for the rest of the debate anyway, but yes, closing responses.
No, thank you for that. You know what? It's been a real pleasure being here this evening, and I'd really like to thank the young people who have organized the event and posed some really interesting questions. The questions were long questions, and I learned a lot in the preamble to a lot of the questions, so thank you so much for that. It's a great opportunity to be able to talk to people. What I've found over the past few weeks, I'm campaigning part-time. I have a full-time job that I attend to during the week as a principal in the Toronto district. It's been a real pleasure talking to people in Ajax over the past few weeks, and whether we have differences on how we're going to get there, everyone agrees that we have to take action urgently. That makes me feel hopeful. And as I mentioned before, when I talk to my teen at home and they feel gloomy and despondent about the future, I do remind them of the things that we've been able to accomplish in the past. And I referred to the acid rain crisis in the past. That was really significant at the time, and we faced the prospect of having all our lakes die out in Ontario. But we were able to confront that and to create change, and I feel that as citizens, whether we're members of the legislature or not, we have a really strong opportunity right now to affect change for our community and on a global basis as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about climate change tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here today. And all of us here have the same mission, which is obviously to make lives better for everyone here in Ajax, in Ontario. And I'm always telling people, read the platform, see what resonates with you, which one do you think really answers your need. I can say that at least for the NDP, we've always put people first. That's at the core of every decision we make, people before profit. And I know I've been hearing it at doors. People are saying they're tired. They're tired of promises. They're tired of the cuts that are happening. They just want someone, they just want a government that will listen and that will actually care. And I can say that, the NDP, we've come close in the last election. We've come second. In this election in Ontario, we just need a few more seats to form government. To be exact, we just need 10 more seats, and we're hoping that Ajax will be actually one of the ridings that could help us in that direction and form majority government and make it an NDP government and implement those commitments that we have, which is really for the people, making sure that the everyday Ontarian receives the value for the tax dollars that they're paying, making sure that they're looked after, whether it's the youths, the seniors, the healthcare workers, the teachers, public sector, small businesses, all of these that we're looking after. Personally, it's been a tremendous learning opportunity for me. I have my 13-year-old that would sometimes go door knocking with me, and it always reminds me that whatever I'm doing right now is planting seeds for the next generation. It's not just a journey for myself, but it's a journey for the youth. And I'm holding myself accountable to everyone, especially the vulnerable and the children, because this is their future that we're talking about. So we're just really hoping that, we're heading towards a change for the better.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Amber Bowen, and I'm the Ontario Liberal candidate here in Ajax. I'm a mom, a teacher, and a global citizen. I've been actively engaged in Durham to stand up for climate justice, whether it's MZOs, whether it's headwaters, whether it's building local towers in the middle of our communities. So I ask you today to vote in a strategic way in Ajax so that we can all come together and bring the collective voices of Durham region and the needs of our community to Queen's Park together. Thank you very much.
All right, as we wrap things up, I'd like to extend a special thank you to St. George's Anglican Church for the use of this facility, St. George's has been a great support for environmental grassroots organizations like Climate Justice Durham. We look forward to working with them in the future. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Andrea for our audio visuals. To Susan, David, Helen, and all the awesome people at St. George's for supporting this event, to all the candidates for attending, to Peter for being a timekeeper, even though he just had his wisdom teeth out, to Trevor and Shamama for monitoring the live stream and taking all the questions, and everyone else who made this happen, including our audience in person and online. Seeing all of you here is living proof that our communities care about climate action, and we know that the situation is dire, and it's easy for us as individuals to feel overwhelmed, but when we join up with others, we become so much more powerful. So tonight also reaffirms the importance of participating in the democratic process. By voting, you can help make sure that we use our energy to work with the people who hold public office instead of having to fight them. We can choose people who will allow us to have constructive collaboration rather than destructive confrontation. As for us, you can follow Climate Justice Durham on Twitter at Durham_climate, on Instagram at Climate Justice Durham, and on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, both called Climate Justice Durham. We post all of our events on those platforms. If you want to contact us directly, you can message directly those accounts, or you can contact us by our email, climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. We sadly have no more debates. We had to cancel our Pickering-Uxbridge debate, which was meant to be tomorrow. Due to a lack of candidate interest, this was expected well before the storm. We were just kind of holding out hope. Still, we'd like to give a shout out to Julia Rondinoni from the Green Party, who responded promptly and enthusiastically about attending the debate before we had to cancel. So this concludes our climate debate. I'd just like to extend another thank you to everyone for helping make this event such a success. Thank you for all for coming, and I hope you have a great night.